Welcome to Beyond the Walls, a podcast for women ready to break barriers and step boldly into their purpose. I'm Kylie, your coach and guide for overcoming fear, silencing self-doubt, and building a life of courage and connection. Whether faith is your anchor or you're still trying to figure it out, this is a space for growth, authenticity, and transformation. Subscribe now and let's start building the courage to be seen, heard, and unstoppable. This is Beyond the Walls, where your purpose begins. Well, hey, everybody. Today's episode is something really special. We're doing a co-hosted conversation with me, myself, Kylie Cross, and Peggy Easterling. She is the host of the Mindset School podcast.
Y'all, that is right. And instead of guessing on each other's shows, we decided to team up. And we wanted to bring you just one powerful episode, and we're going to share it on both of our platforms.
So whether you're tuning in from Beyond the Walls or the Mindset School, you're in the right place. So don't be confused. We're going to be diving in today to talk about how we handle self-doubt and insecurity, because yes, even we, in the places that we've come from, we still have to wrestle with it. And we're going to be sharing insights with you that we believe will resonate with both of our audiences, which is why we're choosing to just do one episode and share it with all of you.
I know. I'm so excited, Kylie, because no matter what podcast they tuned in to listen today, they're going to be so glad that they leaned in and listened and joined us. So let's hop right to it. I spent years, years thinking something was wrong with me. Like if people really knew me and they really understood who I was behind, closed doors, that they would pull away. And I carried that fear everywhere I went, in every relationship, in every room, and everywhere I showed up.
Yeah. I think I feel the same way. I think the language and the verbiage that I've always used is, I think, just keep it small. Keep it small and keep it simple, and then I won't be found out, right? Like, let me just only work in my strengths. Let me just stay in my small lane, and it would prevent me from being exposed as like the imposter syndrome, or I don't even have to show up as a failure because if I never risk anything. But gosh, several years, I was probably in my mid 20s by the time I really owned it. I was so bitter and so lost and unfulfilled. And I think I could no longer, it just wasn't satisfying anymore to keep hiding. Right. And so I felt like I just had to get out. And there's gotta be a better way.
Uh,
Oh.
You're making me so curious. Like you said, you were in your 30s. So I feel like I was in my 40s before I really unpacked. And for me, it looked so like, oh, I was a hot mess express. And I needed Jesus. Like there was nothing else for me in that time that I feel like I could have gone to that would have really got me to where I needed to be. And I was in a space where life felt overwhelming, everything felt too heavy, and I just couldn't. For me, I didn't necessarily shrink down completely. I would show up pretty big in a few spaces, but it was like internal, just shoving all of the emotions in that I really held on to. So, like, tell me more about like 30s. What was that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, so in my smallness, right? For me, I just decided early on, and I was actually just talking with a friend of mine, and I was talking about my childhood. And bless my parents. I love my parents. We have a great relationship. For whatever reason, the environment that I was raised in and with my personality, I'm not a go-getter. I'm not super ambitious. I'm not, right? Like, I think I was born with the keep it small mentality. But I was raised in an environment that sort of allowed that, right? Like I wasn't called to excellence or to try really hard at things. Like kind of just whatever naturally came out, I was accepted, which is great, right? Like I wasn't abused or discouraged or shamed. That's awesome. but in it, I think it allowed me to stay small. And so early on, I had zero ambitions for career, to be in the workplace, to be strong academics. Like, I love people. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. That was kind of my vision and my bar of like, let me just go be a stay-at-home mom. So long story short, try not to make it longer. I was blessed to get married early on. And I'm super grateful. I was not desperate. Like, I felt like I was starting to think through like my plan B by the time I had met my husband, and we got married like right before my 23rd birthday. So I still got married pretty young. I had finished my associate's degree. So I was just starting to consider, like, oh, maybe I'll go get a career. Like, if I don't get married, what will I do? But I did not think that until I was in my 20s. So either way, I didn't have to think about it because I got married and he was happy for me to be a stay-at-home mom. And so 10 years into that, and just have completely lost my identity. We had made a huge move. I lost my whole world, kind of went through this existential crisis where all of my foundations, sort of that the security, the places that I found my confidence, they were taken away. They weren't like, again, I wasn't in this hostile shaming environment, but I had no bearings. I had nobody to please. And I took actually a course that helped me to see how small I was living, the box that I had gotten, the box that I had myself in. And I think for me, I basically said, hey, whatever makes you happy, I'm happy. And I'm not a people pleaser, but I am an authority figure pleaser. And so for me, I think with all of that, I just felt like I could just prove myself as long as other people are happy with me. My husband's happy with me. I mean, obviously the police are happy with me, right? Like, I'm not breaking any laws, like whatever jobs I had, my bosses were happy with me. And I think when that no longer satisfied, nobody was looking to me. Nobody was looking for me to serve them, to please them. Like, I had none of those things. And I really had to then go inward and think, like, where is my identity? What am I striving for? What is my value in? And so for me, that kind of was just the turning point. To step one was like personal responsibility, and to figure out, like, who said I had to do what I was doing? Who put me in this box? Like, God didn't say I had to do these things. And for me, in that space, when you kind of just quiet all of the noise and quiet all of those fears and what we're striving for, I think for me, it opened up the ability to re-choose and to recreate my future.
Mm.
And so I didn't like, I was miserable as a stay-at-home mom, but when I had a choice, I don't have to stay home. I could go get a job. I could go do something else. The minute I got to re-choose it, I got to have freedom again. And to be like, no, actually, I do really want, right? And I think for me, it's all about that taking personal responsibility for our life, for our actions, for who is bringing me my value. Because I think that really is, right? Like, in that brokenness and in that insecurity, it's unstable when it's in other people's hands. They're unstable. Like, I can't be having my instability be dependent on your instability. Right? And so
Yes.
it was just kind of a turning point for me. So what was your crisis moment?
Well, I want to go back to that moment that you just said. You said, I want to get it right. You said I wasn't a people pleaser. I was authority
Figure.
figure pleaser, an
Yes.
authority figure pleaser. Oh,
Yeah.
that resonated with me so much, and I've never heard anyone articulate it that way. But
Mm,
I used to be in corporate management, and when I would walk into the owner of the company, so I could walk into offices with even some upper management, and I was on the same level with them, and feel confident and comfortable with who I was. But there was this one, the owner of the company, I would walk into his office, and immediately there would just be this way that I would show up, and it was almost always just tears. Just to walk in
mm,
his office, it was. absolutely embarrassing, and it was complete self-doubt and insecurity. And, I was in the company doing great things for the company and with the company and in a leadership role and in management with the company, but showing up that way with the owner of the company when he would call me in his office,
Yeah.
it's so what you said resonated with me so very much. And like in that moment for me, showing up in that office with my doubt and my insecurity, like it would overwhelm me. It would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
just this emotion that would flood me. And in that moment, it was like out of control. It was almost like I was in outside of myself
Yeah.
experiencing this. Looking back, a lot of that had to do with just the emotion that I was packing inside.
Mm.
While I feel like, I didn't always want to show up small. I always felt like I was called to big things and I would try big things. But I would not let myself feel the hard emotion of my life. And that shoving like true pure like grief. I lost my dad when he was 39 and I was 16. I lost him to cancer. Shoving, I lost a nephew to suicide, some childhood abuse issues, and shoving all of that emotion inside and never processing it. It was like I walked around with that everywhere I went. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was in my 40s till that I began to unpack that. And I think some of that being still within me, like me holding all of that down, I think of it like ping pong balls and holding them down in a bathtub. And
Mhm.
when something else triggered me in that moment, for that me, it was that owner calling me into his office. I
Yeah.
couldn't, it was like startling, and I couldn't keep ping pong balls down in the bathtub. Like they just came up.
Yeah.
And so the emotion came to the surface, and the self-doubt and the insecurity, it just overwhelmed me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that makes me curious. I'll ask you this. So, what I hear you sharing is like, did you not do any counseling or talk to people after all of those incidences and death? Like, were you completely isolated by yourself, or talk us through like any healing up until the 40s, or you just,
Oh, girl, there wasn't so the little bit of counseling that I did, it was marriage counseling, and it was with my spouse who didn't want to be, and now he's my ex-spouse. He's the parent of my children.
mm,
And he didn't want to be in the counseling. And so,
mm,
and during that season, like I was only pointing fingers in his direction. I wasn't in my circle trying to heal anything within me. I was just pointing
yeah,
fingers at things that he had done, that I felt like was betrayal. And so the answer is absolutely zero. Like the unpacking of the pet ping pong balls and processing the emotions of grief and hurt and loss and trauma, zero until I was in my 40s.
wow. That is incredible. And you're not much older than that now, right? Like that's just only been a few years. Like, so even
Well,
just,
I'm 40, but I'll be 50 in a few years.
but that is amazing. Like, I want you to be able to just pause and let's celebrate for a minute. Like, then how much radical deep work you did over such a short period of time, right? Like, I feel like we represent the opposite extremes, okay? Because I mean, I'm going to go into my slight history knowledge from elementary school on volcanoes, right? Like I feel like there is the like there's the slow leak, the slow release, and then there's the massive eruption, right? And so if you're representing like there was a tight lid, like right how you're describing it with all of those ping pong balls down, like suppressing all of it to then you can't, and then it all comes out, or as much as you possibly can handle in the moment. A lot comes out, right? And I've been a slow leak over years and the slow change. But I think what's so beautiful about what we represent, and I think that's what I would want my audience to know, and I'm sure you would want your audience to hear, is that we are so similar just as human beings and as women. we are all wrestling with that question of, am I loved? Am I forgiven? Am I worthy? Like, do I have value? And it shows up in so many different ways, right? So you were a high achiever and you went and did things to kind of mask and not deal with. Let's just redirect. And I'm like, okay, just keep it small. I'm just going to slow burn and keep it like I don't add anything else, right? Like if I can just, I'm keeping my own ping pong balls down, right? If I just like, let me only be responsible with this little bit that I can manage. But gosh, however many years that we've been processing and dealing and healing, like, yay
Mm.
for us, right? Like,
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
amazing things can still be done, have been done, and still will be. It fires me up. I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things, though, Kylie, is that in that moment that I was reaching for high achievement, I was doing it to fulfill some that self-doubt and insecurity. So I wanted to fill that space with my achievement. And so
Yeah,
that was the reason why I was reaching outside of my small
yeah,
to make it mean something about my identity. But the danger of doing that is when you do put your identity in your work, at one moment, someone else's decision that was a bad financial decision within a department at your job could
yeah,
completely take that rug out from under your feet of your identity. Like I know people who have been this high person in a company and overnight they wake up and they don't know who they are and they've given 20, 40, 30 years of their life
yeah,
and they've given it all to their company instead of going after and allowing relationships and whatever, and they've done it in the name of just handling that self-doubt and that it's insecurity and making it mean something about who they are as a person
yeah,
instead of letting who they are as a person be who they are as a person and
yeah.
then taking that person into a work experience.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Because I think then in the opposite, I'm just trying to not test it, right? Like I really want to believe that I'm not broken, but if I don't ever put myself out there, I won't ever be proved wrong. But I'm also then never proved right. And I think that was kind of like the twist for me that I felt like it's not sad, like I'm hiding. I'm still hiding. It doesn't feel any more honest to be hiding, right? Like I'm not more secure because I'm hiding. I'm not more loved or accepted. Like there's not less fear just by not striving for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it is a great blessing and I want people to hear that it doesn't matter whether you've been the slow burn so far, you're still completely suppressing or like you just had the eruption. I think when we embrace it and make the most of it in the moment, like God can do something with it and it is recoverable. You know, I think one of Mr. Rogers' quotes that I love is he said that anything that is mentionable is manageable. And it's kind of like that concept, right? Like when we can just admit it, when we can put real words to our upset, real words to our fears, all of a sudden it just lowers the significance. It lowers the pressure. It lowers the overwhelmingness, the weight of what we fear is going to happen. And I think it allows us to kind of take those baby steps. At least that's what it was for me in my experience. But I'm curious then, with it being such an eruption, what was your biggest aha moment or healing moment? Like, what did that valley season look like?
Oh, girl. So, the crazy part is I had gone back to school to get a degree and I wanted to become a professional counselor. And in that season, I went in as an internship into this 12-step program. And as part of that internship, I have to just show up in a certain way as a leader in an environment. And so I decided to do that internship at my particular church. Well, I show up for the very first day, and in that moment I thought, okay, I'm here to help other people, like let me get in here and help everybody else. And I'd been on staff at churches and I'd been in corporate management, and I'd done things. It wasn't that I hadn't, but in this space I walk in day one of the program and I'm really still just figuring out if it's a good fit for me, like for me to
Yeah.
do my internship in that space. And I walk in and they're like, and they're walking through the whole program. It's just going, and I just sense in my heart as I'm just in that environment, and I really sense that it was like a God moment for me, and it was like, you think you're here to help other people, and it wasn't an audible voice; it was just a knowing. But I thought that I was there to help other people.
Yeah.
But really, I was there to unpack every one of those ping pong balls. And I
Yeah.
knew it, like I knew it so strongly that very first day, that very first moment. And then I knew that it was something that it was time.
Yeah.
It is time
Yeah.
because I had held on and held in for so long, like that, like you're saying, like that little school project where the volcano is going to erupt and all of the vinegar and the baking soda, it's about to come and it's going to overflow.
Yeah.
And that's what was about to happen for me, and I knew it. And it looked
Mm.
so messy. I have this gray chair in my house, and it's so sentimental to me now. And it'll probably be there until it's all raggedy because
Yeah.
when I see that chair and I walk by, it's the space where I am packed and I gave space to my life like I had
Mm.
never done it before.
Yeah.
And I gave space to allow myself to feel and to
Yeah.
be human and to
Mm.
process some doubt and some
Yeah.
insecurity and to process how was I feeling my life with things to make it mean something about my identity that it wasn't, and how was I being insecure and bringing doubt into every part of who I was
Yeah.
instead of showing up with the backbone of being who I really was and
Mm.
showing up that way in every environment.
Yeah. Wow. What do you feel like? I'm curious with having that big of an eruption. Did did it feel like one big release as opposed to feeling like you had to tackle 10 mountains? Like they all kind of like represent the insecurity and the unlovedness, and so you just had to heal the one wound and apply it as needed, or you know what I mean? Like as opposed to the slow burn for me, I felt like it was like topical, like, oh, okay, this stage, and now it's this thing, and now it's this thing. What was
Yeah.
it for you?
Um, so really it was just unpacking, going all the way back to my 8-year-old self
Mm,
because she was a part of every piece of the future that I believed about myself.
yeah.
And so once I was able to process that part of my story, it was like I could release that girl that was so taken advantage of, and every part of that past that I was interweaving into my future
Yeah.
in ways that I didn't even know how to show up as an adult with rational emotions and
Yeah.
to have emotional intelligence that I could bring into a work environment. So tell me more. I'm curious also about your slow burn.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that and what that looked like for you and how it was different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I was thinking, so I also experienced some sexual abuse in my childhood, and I was around like 13 um with a family friend. And so it kept quiet, but probably for only like 2 years, maybe a year and a half, I would say. And then I did go into counseling, like everybody knew because it was a family friends, then everybody in the family. Um, he was hanging out with the church youth group. So then people at church needed to know, like ministries needed to know and be involved, or we had to go to court. and all kinds of things, like
Yeah.
as much exposure as you could possibly imagine, right? And so I think because of that particular moment, and I moved around a ton, I feel like that kind of stood out to me when I was hearing your story. I think when we're talking about like connectedness with people and the hiding and the just being involved and being secure, being exposed and vulnerable with people, right? Like I think there was a hard business shell about me that was created because I moved so much, that I didn't really need. Like I could be your friend, but I didn't really need you to be my friend, kind of a connectedness, right? And so I think because of that moment, getting having it exposed, having to kind of deal with it and process it, I think started the foundation for me to heal layers at a time. And I think being able to always go back and to see how like there had been healing, but then we need to go back and there's more to heal, right? Like how did that impact all my other future relationships, either romantic ones, just my own insecurities of how I was going to show up and be loved and my behavior, to then friendships and relationships. And so I think when I became a Christian when I was 19, and I think I was raised in a religious home, like I feel like I was raised in that way, but I really like owned it for myself and really made Jesus Lord of my life. Um I think was also a really significant turning point to being able to really be secure and to know who I was. But at the same time, like, so all of that major transformation, exposure, healing, slow release of trauma, insecurities, and processing, right? Like, so it went through this abuse, it went through friendships, my own personal relationship, my growing up and sort of becoming my own person and an individual and not just in my household, right? Like all of those transitions. But then when I found myself married and I'm bitter and all get out and just completely lost my identity, even after all of that, I think was then the deepest kind of reconciling of the walls, which is why I have Beyond the Walls, right? Of feeling like we live in these lives based on things that happened to us as children or based on what we did. And it kind of sets that platform for, oh, this is how my future is going to be. All men are this, all women are this, all corporate people are like this, all religious people are like this, right? Like we put ourselves in these boxes. And I think for me, the freedom to really to go as deep as I really needed to go. And so I think as the slow burn has happened, I think I've been able to experience the re-healing every step of the way. And it's kind of like it's not one and done, right? Like it's not like it just all disappears and everything's fantastic again, as if we could prevent future damage. And I would say that's probably how I lived most of my life was like, let's prevent this from ever happening again. And so that kind of sets you up for a lot of disappointment. And I think I keep having to learn that lesson over and over again of how can we heal as much as what was exposed to us, as much as we were capable of. How do I keep owning those decisions, owning the place that I'm at now, and then be willing to face, like when it bubbles up again, what does it mean now? What is it? Where again is my identity? Where again is when I'm being sabotaged or I feel like I'm being attacked or accused, whether it's my own thoughts or it's somebody else's actually saying it to me or I'm feeling it or I'm assuming it. Um, and so I think to me, I think that's been has been my experience. I don't know if that answers your question in the clearest way, but I think that's what comes to my mind, right? Is just the ability to tackle one thing at a time and to really believe, like I think it was Shrek, right? And he's describing the onions, right? Like he's got the layers of onions, right? And I think when
Yeah.
we realize and really own, like we do have layers. And so even whether it was an explosion or a slow burn, we both still have layers and there's deeper, more awareness and more understanding, more acceptance to be understood and accepted.
Yeah. That's so good. One of the ways I articulate it in my coaching is like whenever we've gone through a season of processing, we still have neural pathways. Like we still
Mm,
have pathways in our brain that go all the way to the end of the road. So let's say you're in an argument with your spouse and you left your last spouse because of the challenges and it was really hard and really bad. Well, that pathway is built all the way to the end of your road, even with your new spouse. That pathway is one that's in your brain and it's available to you. And your brain may bring that up in your
yeah,
self-doubt, in your insecurity, in your moment where you're
yeah,
flailing. And one of the ways that I describe that is in your scramble. And so in your scramble, your neural pathway is there. Well, it doesn't mean that you've got to go all the way back to the start and like you've
yeah,
already gone through counseling, you've already gone through your slow burn, you've already gone and you've healed some spaces.
yeah,
It just means you're rewiring your brain to a new
yes,
decision. And
yeah,
in the midst of that crazy thing that your brain offered you, like you're saying, to offer your future self a different pathway and to offer your future something so much better than what your brain is offering you in that moment. And to
yeah,
have that self awareness when that doubt and insecurity comes to you is so powerful. And the
yeah,
more self-awareness that we can bring into that space, the better.
yeah,
And no one takes us on that journey better than God because we can really go on the journey with Him and His timing because sometimes we can't handle it.
yeah,
We can't put ourselves into the volcano. The
yeah,
volcano came to me organically.
yeah,
And however, we can start the process. We can
yeah,
get with a coach who's going to connect with us. We can connect with that person intentionally. We can work towards that journey intentionally and work through our triggers in a way that we take ownership of them and offer that future to ourselves.
yeah. That's so true. I feel like the most pivotal scripture that really helped sort of lay the foundation, because this scripture hit me before we made our big move, like right before, maybe a year before my big existential crisis, right? Like my explosion time. And it's Ephesians 3:20 that says that God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And I think when I sat with that scripture, it hit me in a different way than I'd ever heard it before. And for me, so I think it's in the same vein that I think we get so rigid. We're either focused so much on protecting something, avoiding something, proving something, and we're like fixated on this one particular thing. Like, in order for me to be loved, to be happy, to be successful, whatever, it has to look like this. And God's like, I have better than that because we can imagine that. Like, it says that He can do better than we can ask or imagine. And so if it's better than what I'm imagining, that like my mandatory, this is going to be it, like my closed mind, right? I don't know what it is. And so it's in that space that I feel like I have constantly had to go back and reassess and to sit in again. That's like, okay, I don't know what it is. So it means it's not what I'm demanding. It's not what I'm desperate for. It's not what I think it's going to be. Can I be willing to sit still and be quiet long enough to be curious? And I think that's like when I put words to what I'm actually upset about and then be curious about it. Like be curious about why is this such a big deal? What am I making it mean? Is it a reference to the past? Because I think you're totally right. Like when we do those healing layers, we don't have to keep like ripping off the scab and go way back down to the deepest. Like that layer was healed. We're now at a new spot. Like now, what am I making it mean about me? What am I making it mean about my value and where I'm going and what I'm capable of doing, right? Like our identity. And so I feel like there's been times where I've had to just be like, I'm going to sit and imagine, like, be willing to be willing. Like, I was like, I can't even imagine it looking any differently and it being something different than what I think it's supposed to be like. Let me just believe in the possibility of believing in the possibility. Like before I can even get there. Does that make sense?
No, 100%. And I say all the time, I love that you brought that up because I say all the time that, if we will stop beating ourselves up and putting on boxing gloves against ourselves and invite curiosity in, like,
Yeah.
because that's so key.
Yeah.
Because if we will get curious about, oh, this my brain just offered me this weird what? Like,
Yeah.
even today, like I'm married to an amazing man. He loves me so much. But even today, my brain will offer me just
Mhm.
crazy things because of things I've walked through in my past and experiences I had, and the way that I am intentionally renewing my mind.
Yeah.
And and some of the paths that are offered me in the moments of conflict, they
Yeah.
take the road in a path that I never. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And now, like you're saying, to offer curiosity in that space, like,
Yeah.
oh, time out. What?
Yeah.
Are
Is
you
that really true? Yeah.
this is what you got to offer me? And to get curious about your brain in that way and just to be like, huh, my brain just like really took me to that space and to take a step back from it. Like you're saying, what is my brain making that mean about
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah.
I love how you articulated that.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that really it boils down to we're always it's kind of like those petals, right? Where you're like, he loves me not. He loves me, he loves me not. And I think we are doing that to ourselves in whatever the language that we've chosen, right? Whether we're worthy, we're accepted, we're enough, we're valuable. And whoever it is that we're deciding is the factor. And I look at it and I think it is a conversation to have of like, well, who is the God? If you're spiritually minded and looking for God and that being your identity, it's a major petal flower, right? Like a foundation to be constantly deciding we're in his grace, we're out of his grace. He loves me, he doesn't love me. He's mad at me, right? Like as opposed to being a constant stable. And then there's our relationship with the other people and in the world. What's my boss saying about me? What are my teachers, my authority figures, my peers, my friends? And then there's ourselves. And I think for me, that was the last, like, I firmly made a decision after this course that I took. It was really believing in the firm power of word. And God created the universe with word. Like he spoke us into existence. And so it matters what we say about ourselves and then we say about other people. And I decided in that moment, I was like, I am just going to choose whether I feel like it, believe it or not. I'm going to start choosing to just accept what God says about me. I'm going to stop calling him a liar. I'm going to stop arguing with myself. I'm going to stop trying to prove him, like, demand that I'm
Yeah.
unloved. Like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And so I feel like for me, I think what became so clear in that moment was like, okay, first, let me get my identity back out of the world. Let me stop looking to my authority figures to give me, to bestow upon, to earn my value from them. But then I have to accept it and I'm going to choose to give it to God. Like it's his to tell me. And it has been the shield for me, my sustaining ability to when the doubts come, right? Because I think that's what we're ultimately seeing here to our people is like, gosh, as however much we've already healed and we've grown, like we're never going to stop being tempted to doubt, tempted to not believe
Yeah.
it. And like what you're saying, like reset those neural pathways, like to take those thoughts captive, to choose to align them to what is really true. I want to get out of the way of that. Like, I don't want to make that harder on myself. Like, I do not want to demand that I am unloved. Like, it's just a bold faced lie. And so I'm going to put my energy into just accepting it and then go from there.
Yeah. And when you do, you're the way that void that you had for yourself. Like, one of the modalities that in coaching that I was trained in is to find your primal question. For me, my question is, am I loved?
Mm,
And when I really stand in the place where I, just like you said, I put my stake in the ground and I stand in that place of knowing I'm loved and you work from that space becomes the superpower that you bring into a space for other people. It's working
yeah,
within your gifting because you are able to show other people love to a level that you like it's exponential. So you're able to show that love and care for someone in a way that makes their doubts and insecurities
yeah,
go away because they know they're loved by you
yeah,
and they
yeah,
know that for sure. There's no doubt, there's no insecurity in that. And
yeah,
that's so beautiful
mhm,
um, to see the gifts in other people when they do put that stake in the right ground.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think what's it has been so helpful for me in that is that it allows recovery when people hurt me. Because if it's not like we are imperfect people, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to hurt each other, we're going to be selfish. Like we have weaknesses, right? We let each other down. And so I think in that space, it allows me to find reason, find grace, to find security in recovering from wounds. Like when it doesn't go well and I'm disappointed, it doesn't cut me down to I'm unloved. If I were lovable enough, if I were worthy enough, they wouldn't have done this to me. And
Mm.
instead, I think it just removes that question. Like that has nothing to do with it. Like
Yeah.
I was hurt. I'm disappointed. There's a conflict. Like I'm being triggered to cause myself to doubt myself. That's what's at
Y-
play,
Yeah.
right? When we kind of like in those wounds, like when we keep a new baseline, like my baseline is I'm loved.
Yeah.
Now what? Right? Like now all
Right.
I am is just disappointed and I'm frustrated or I'm offended or right? Like,
Yeah.
and then we get to decide, do we was it actually intentional? And I think one of the things I offer a freebie guide on my website, and it's how to like unlock relationship security and how to like process and ask yourselves questions, because I think so much in our conflict, our fear of conflict, our fear of this, like we've got to prove ourselves and we have this shell or this wall up to protect ourselves from other people, is like, okay, what if you being upset in our interaction really actually has more to do with you than it does to do with me? Like, what's it exposing about your security and your love for yourself or this other person, right? Like, what are they going through that they're feeling so threatened or frustrated or selfish? Or, like it just allows us to kind of have more compassion, maybe take it less personally, even though, like, if you have a friend or a family member or a boss that like just causes that hurt and that wound, if we could remove just that one step to say this is not about my identity, this is just like above that. It's hurtful, it's
Yeah.
frustrating, it's disappointing, I'm afraid, you need boundaries, right? We got codependency issues, whatever. Like, okay, how do I look not only to my own interest, but also to the interest of others?
Yeah.
What is this actually saying about them? How's their identity? How's their security? How's their fill in the blank? And I think it brings a lot more of that, like, I don't know, a leveling playing field that allows us to just be human and be imperfect and recover, like the forgiveness in it, to like give you another chance and to move on. Like, how do we just be patient with one another as we mature in different ways at different times, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, like, there are times that I still go back all the way to the end of that road, though, like,
Yes.
that I still don't feel loved. Like, I wish that I could say that I had grown to that space, but there are moments where, I can think of a moment just recently with my daughter, and she said something to me in a way. Actually, it wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. And I had shared some stuff with her, and she seemed so indifferent to my conversation. And in that moment, like the opportunity for me to be completely offended was there, and I took it like
Yeah.
in that moment. And so, you know, knowing the insecurities and the self-doubt that we still wrestle with,
Yeah.
in that moment, I was wrestling. I was just flailing. And then, but the beauty of what you're saying is I can come full circle and I
Yeah.
can come back to that foundation of recognizing it,
Yeah.
recognition. Oh, time out. Wait,
Yeah. What's actually
this,
going on?
yeah. What is behind this? And like you were saying earlier, to invite that curiosity in,
Yeah.
because there are still those moments of self-doubt, of insecurity, of just completely just not being okay,
Yeah.
and to really be at a space where I'm choosing in those moments to go back to that foundation that you just spoke of,
Yeah.
that in the end, even though this was some tension and some conflict, whether it's with a work relationship or whether it's with a family member or someone, to come back to that,
Yeah.
recognize, take that self-awareness, take that step back, let that curiosity come in, and recognize that
Yeah.
as that self-doubt and insecurity that it is,
Yeah.
and then be willing
Yeah.
be willing to apologize where you need to, be willing to work towards the growth that you need to, be willing to continue in those moments that you catch yourself flailing, be
Yeah.
willing to do whatever the work is to get
Yeah.
you beyond that space.
Yeah. And it's hard. And I think what's right, because I think even in the slow burn for my existence, right? And then there's these huge, my own little eruptions that are much more significant and painful. But then I think for me, I think I'm so wanting it to be one and done. And it's true. Like we have to keep going back. It's like riding high. I'm super secure and super confident. And I'm a parent of teens right now. Like I have a teen and a preteen. And I'm in my almost mid 40s, right? Like I feel like I'm in the thick of it. And I'm doing like I am a business owner now, right? Everything that I didn't think I was going to ever want or do, I am now choosing to big time show up and expose myself to all of the fears and the failures of what ifs, right? And so, but it's been a slow progression, but all the more. And I feel like this last year has been the hardest. Like I think all I have been able to do is to keep re-identifying with who really is who's my identity, who gets to say what my value is and isn't, when it feels very personal. It feels like an onslaught of like, I mean, our kids can cut us, they have to, but so for me, like I think it was yesterday, I was dropping them off and they were so grumpy and testy and right, like I just felt myself in that moment feeling like my daughter got out of the car, like accused me of not being a good listener, right? And immediately, like, let me defend myself. Like, I didn't say anything in the moment, but like the whole drive home, I was just like, okay, talk myself off of the ledge. Like, okay, if she, I think I'm a great listener. She was clearly not communicating, right? Like all of the things of defending ourselves, and she was wrong. No, I was wrong. But it has nothing to do with like we both love each other. I can still be a great mom, even if at that moment there's something in our communication that needs repaired. There's something that needs maturing. There's something that just needs worked on. And it's like when we can deal with just that moment, it not being the entire world, right? It lowers the significance to just be like, okay, that was really disappointing. I'm going to take a deep breath because I don't want to be cranky the rest of the day because these two are giving me their negative energy, right? Like, how do we just let it go? Like, I don't want to keep holding it against them. It's like in that space but we have to choose to be aware, right? And to be able to recognize what is really at play right now. What do we want to do about it? What's true about me? What's true about her? And when we don't bring the identity into it, it certainly makes it a lot easier. But the answer isn't in her to heal my identity, right? And I think that's the point of probably what we both have really learned is our identity is not something that I say is that other people's approval is just icing on the cake because we want it. It feels good. Like there's nothing wrong with wanting other people's approval or their acceptance or their positive feedback, but I don't need it, right? Like it's not sustainable. It's not nourishing to only have it. And as much as, right, like I need if the positive is what keeps me going, how much more than the negative will destroy me. And I think our own identity in Christ is like the only thing that will keep us stable. It'll help us sustain us when we're being torn down. And it helps us to not become too dependent on like, oh, it's a nice hug. Like, I would love for you to like me, Peggy. Like, that would be great. Am I still enough if you chose not to? And I think that's where I keep coming back to, and it leaves room to be like, okay, people can accept us or not accept us. We can grow, we can change, we can mature, there can be a lot more community in that. But it's best when our identity is not on the line with other people.
Yeah. So good.
Mm,
I so good. This has been such a great conversation. It's going to help so many, so many.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. We're
Awesome.
here for you, ladies. Whoever's listening, we're in the trenches with you. It's a journey. We don't have to do it alone, you know, and we don't have to be each other's enemies either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're listening and you're struggling with self-doubt and insecurity, reach out to Kylie or myself. We would be glad to
Mhm.
have a conversation with you, to lean in and just share some ways to help you just get past the season.
Yeah. It's been so fun to do this co-hosting.
I
I'm glad that
agree.
we can do this together and to reach all of our audiences. And Peggy, I love all of your stuff. So guys, go listen to her, the Mindset School podcast. So many great nuggets. I think as I was looking through our stuff and having our conversations before we recorded, I was like, oh, it's so cool. Like we have such similar messages. And I feel like I'm on your personal life side, and you're helping women to grow in their business and to really shine in that professional side. And we're all still one, right? Like, and how we show up is how we want to show up to the world across the board. So many
Yeah.
good stuff.
Uh, it's been a pleasure, Kylie. Thank you so much for
Yes.
just, we've been in environments where we were like 1 degree away from each other for so long. So it's great to finally connect in this
Yeah,
way.
it really is. It's
All
been a
right.
lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Walls. If this episode inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend and leave a review. Your support helps more women step into their courage and purpose. Ready for more? Subscribe to the podcast and contact me. You can find me at beyondthewallspodcast.com. Reach out for coaching, more resources, and all the support you could need. Remember, breaking through the walls is just the beginning. Your best life is waiting.